How would you react if you woke up on a Saturday morning, looked out your window, and saw 100 strangers in designer puffer jackets swarming your private driveway? Picture this: a white catering van, a literal commercial shuttle bus, and a fleet of Lexuses idling at your gate, ready to throw a massive party in the cabin you built with your own two hands. They plan to trample your deck, use your personal bathroom, and drink wine on your porch, and you weren't even invited. That was exactly my reality at high noon. The convoy was led by a Navy BMW SUV sporting vanity plates that read GRFN1. Out stepped Charlene Griffin, the self-appointed queen and tyrannical president of our mountain community's homeowners association. She marched up to my gate with the smug, untouchable grin of a predator about to swallow her prey whole. But Charlene made one fatal miscalculation. She thought she was bullying another passive neighbor into submission. She didn't realize she had just kicked open the door to a legal meat grinder. By trying to hijack my private property for a single afternoon, she unwittingly triggered a chain reaction that would completely obliterate her empire, expose a massive state-level fraud ring, and land her a 9-year prison sentence. Welcome to the ultimate masterclass in malicious compliance. To understand the sheer scale of this delusion, we have to rewind a few days. The escalation didn't start with a bang. It started with the click-clack of high heels on my gravel driveway. I was in my backyard hauling a bundle of firewood into the bed of my truck when I heard her approaching. Charlene's bleach-blonde bob bounced with a distinct, aggressive attitude. She wasn't walking. She was marching, like a CEO storming into a boardroom to fire a subordinate. "Brandon Zeller," she barked, her voice cutting through the crisp mountain air like a rusty saw. She said my name as if I owed her back taxes. "We need to talk about your cabin." I casually wiped the sawdust off my jeans, keeping my heart rate perfectly level. "What about it?" She crossed her arms, adopting that classic, defensive posture of a narcissist who already knows they are crossing a boundary. "The HOA has scheduled a private event at your cabin this Saturday. 100 guests, caterers, portable heaters, the works." I actually blinked. For a fraction of a second, my brain refused to process the sheer audacity of the statement. "You did what?" Charlene huffed, waving her oversized clipboard in my face like it was a federal warrant. "Your cabin is listed under the community's shared assets." Let's pause right here and dissect the psychological pathology at play. This is a tactic known in behavioral psychology as gaslighting through authority. By stating an absolute lie with supreme confidence, they expect the victim to doubt their own reality. But facts don't care about HOA delusions. "No, it's not," I said, stepping closer to close the physical gap and strip away her intimidation tactic. "I built that cabin with my own hands. It's on my private land. It is fully paid for, legally registered, and deeded exclusively in my name." Her eyes narrowed to icy slits. "You've got no claim. You signed the revised HOA charter last year." I narrowed my eyes right back, matching her energy but anchoring it in cold, hard reality. "No, I didn't. I explicitly refused. You tried to slide that sketchy clause in during the holiday potluck meeting, hoping no one would read the fine print. Remember?" Her face twitched. I had hit a nerve. But people like Charlene are incapable of retreating. When backed into a corner, their megalomania forces them to double down. "Regardless," she sneered, her cheap, overpowering perfume hitting my nostrils like chemical warfare. "The HOA board voted unanimously. It's happening. We've already sent out the invites." "You are out of your mind," I said flatly. She stepped even closer, attempting a fomaternal, condescending tone. "Brandon, don't be difficult. The community deserves access to scenic spaces for events. It's just one afternoon. One afternoon with 100 strangers trampling my deck, using my personal bathroom, and breaking my stuff?" Charlene shrugged, delivering her final, supposed death blow. "You won't even have to be there. We're bringing our own keys." My blood ran cold. The cabin didn't use traditional keys. It had an electronic keypad. The realization hit me like a freight train. "You copied my gate code." She gave a tight, venomous smile, turning on her heel like a general who had just won the war. "We'll be arriving at noon sharp. I suggest you make yourself scarce." Any normal person would have exploded. They would have screamed, thrown the firewood, or threatened violence. But that is exactly what a Karen wants. They want you to lose your temper so they can play the victim and call the police on you. I didn't yell. I stood there, letting the silence stretch. I dropped the firewood into the truck bed. The game was on. There is a beautiful, terrifying power in absolute silence. I didn't waste a single breath arguing with a brick wall. Instead, I initiated a rapid-fire sequence of airtight, legally bulletproof countermeasures. Step 1. Digital severance. I walked straight to the keypad at the main gate. Within 60 seconds, I wiped the entire system memory and installed a brand new, randomly generated access code. Charlene's stolen key was now utterly useless. Step 2. Physical fortification. I drove down to the local hardware store and bought the heaviest industrial steel chain and a weatherproof master padlock I could find. I drove to the rear access trail, a little-known dirt path leading to my property, and chained it shut. My cabin was now a closed fortress. Step 3. The iron curtain of enforcement. I picked up my phone and called a buddy of mine who managed the largest local tow yard in the county. I gave him a very specific heads up. I've got a massive influx of unauthorized vehicles attempting to breach my private land this weekend. Anyone parked past the property line is a trespasser. Bring your biggest rigs. The towing fees are entirely on them. He laughed and told me his drivers would be on standby. Step 4. The ultimate witness. In modern warfare, paper trails are ammunition, but 4K video is a nuclear bomb. I installed a discreet, motion-activated security camera directly overlooking the front gate, syncing the feed directly to a secure cloud server. I double-checked the cabin's internal security system. Every threat, every lie, and every act of trespassing was about to be recorded in high definition. By Friday night, the trap was fully set. I was camped out in my living room, the wood stove burning, a pot of homemade chili simmering on the stove, and a cold six-pack of beer in the fridge. I was a spider resting in the center of a very sticky web, waiting for the flies. And oh, did they come. By 12 p.m. on Saturday, my surveillance monitor lit up. The road leading up to my property was a chaotic parade of wealth and entitlement. Pressed khakis, designer boots, women holding expensive wine totes, and caterers setting up folding tables in the dirt. It looked like an Instagram-perfect vineyard tour that had taken a wrong turn. Then, the honking started. Charlene's navy BMW laid on the horn, a long, obnoxious blast, expecting the gate to magically part like the Red Sea. I stood by my window, sipping black coffee from a flannel mug, enjoying my front row seat to the circus. Eventually, Charlene climbed out of her SUV. She marched up to the gate, punched in the stolen code, and waited. Nothing. She punched it again, harder. A red error light flashed. Frustrated, she grabbed the heavy iron bars and yanked. The gate didn't give a single inch. She turned to her restless crowd of wealthy neighbors. Everyone, please remain calm. There's just been a small miscommunication. That was my cue. I stepped out onto my front porch, the crisp mountain wind biting at my face, casually leaned against the wooden railing, and projected my voice over the idling engines. You mean the part where you planned a massive party on private, deeded property without asking the owner? Charlene whipped around. The color in her cheeks rose furiously, turning a mottled, embarrassing red. Brandon, this behavior is incredibly hostile. You're creating a scene. Nope, I replied, taking another slow sip of coffee. You created the scene. I'm just enjoying the show. She stormed the gate, gripping the bars like an inmate demanding release. We had this space scheduled. You are violating the committee's approved event calendar. Hate to break it to you, Charlene. I shot back, my voice dripping with icy satisfaction. But your little printed calendar doesn't overrule a county property deed. Her sycophantic assistant, a woman clutching a clipboard tighter than her own pearls, leaned in to whisper something, but Charlene swatted her away. We are entirely within our rights under Article 12, Section 6 of the Community Coordination Guidelines. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket and held it up. Already checked it last night. That section explicitly applies only to common grounds and recreational zones, neither of which includes my private residence. The psychological shift in the crowd was instantaneous. The arrogant laughter died. A man in a Patagonia fleece vest pulled out his phone and started frantically scrolling through the HOA bylaws. The murmur of realization rippled through the guests. They were in the wrong. You're being unbelievably selfish. Charlene screamed through gritted teeth, her carefully constructed facade completely shattering. And you are criminally trespassing, I replied, raising my voice so the entire back row could hear me. In fact, the sheriff's office was notified 30 minutes ago. They are currently sending deputies up the mountain to clear this road. So, unless you all want to personally explain to Deputy Hines why you are attempting to force entry onto private land, I strongly suggest you pack up your wine and head back down. Panic is contagious. A few people immediately backed toward their cars. The shuttle driver, wanting zero part in a legal dispute, flicked his blinker on. The caterers exchanged nervous glances and began aggressively loading their trays back into the van. But Charlene, blinded by her own hubris, dug her grave a little deeper. You'll regret this, Brandon. I'll have the board issue a cease and desist. We will take extreme legal action. I laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh. Go right ahead. I spent yesterday morning on the phone with my attorney. He is practically salivating at the chance to file a counterclaim for trespassing, attempted unlawful entry, and, here's the best part, misappropriation of community funds. Because I'm guessing you used HOA money to rent all this luxury equipment, right? Charlene froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost in a blonde bob. Oh, yeah, I said, stepping off the porch and walking right up to the gate, looking her dead in the eye. The gourmet food, the rental tables, the commercial shuttle. Billing it under community development isn't going to hold up in court. I called that shuttle company yesterday. They require a 100% upfront deposit. You drained the HOA account for this. It was unanimously approved. Her voice had lost all its venom. It was now a hollow, desperate squeak. Really? I tilted my head. Because I spoke to 3 separate board members last night. They told me you abruptly canceled last month's meeting and never rescheduled. So, either you completely forged a board vote, or you held a secret, private session without a legal quorum. Both are severe violations of our bylaws. Not to mention, textbook financial fraud under state regulations. The murmuring behind her turned into open hostility. Wait, she used our dues for this, a woman yelled. Someone else muttered about recalling the entire board. Right on cue, the red and blue flashing lights of a county cruiser crested the hill. Deputy Hines stepped out, adjusted his utility belt, and took in the chaotic scene. Afternoon, he drawled, his hand resting casually near his radio. Got a dispatch report of an unauthorized gathering attempting to breach private land. Charlene practically launched herself at the deputy, spewing a breathless, frantic word salad about community initiatives, misunderstandings, and how I was weaponizing technicalities. Hines ignored her completely and looked at me. You the property owner? I nodded and slid a thick manila folder through the bars of the gate. Property deed, dated county survey, and a notarized statement of intent from my lawyer. Everything is in there. Hines flipped through the documents, gave a low, impressed whistle, and turned his attention back to Charlene. His demeanor shifted from polite to absolute zero. Ma'am, I'm going to need you and your guests to vacate this area immediately. This is ridiculous, she shrieked. No, ma'am. Hines cut her off, stepping into her personal space. You attempted to host a massive private event on a property you do not own, without the owner's legal consent. That is not a technicality. That is unlawful. Move your vehicles now. Someone in the back of the crowd started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, half the neighborhood was applauding my victory as they scurried back to their cars. The carefully staged event unraveled in real time. The caterers peeled out. Even her loyal clipboard assistant jumped into her Prius and sped off without saying a single word to her boss. Hines stood with his arms crossed, waiting until the very last vehicle rolled down the hill. He looked at Charlene, who was standing alone in the dust. You can leave right now, or we can take a ride downtown and discuss criminal trespassing charges. Without a word, she turned, practically dove into her BMW, and sped off, her tires spraying gravel into the ditch. I exhaled, feeling the adrenaline slowly leave my system. I looked at the empty, quiet road. The battle was won. But the war? The war was just getting started. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Gregor, one of the quieter, spineless board members who usually kept his head down. Brandon, he whispered, sounding terrified. You didn't hear this from me, but there is a massive paper trail. She used the HOA's discretionary fund to pay for everything today. All of it. And she physically backdated the digital vote logs. Do you think the community will back us if we push for a forensic audit? I stared at the pristine, untouched woods surrounding my cabin. Gregor, I smiled. They're already sharpening the knives. If Charlene thought Saturday was a nightmare, it was nothing compared to the absolute slaughter of the emergency HOA board meeting 2 days later. I pulled into the community center parking lot, which was overflowing with trucks and sedans parked haphazardly on the grass. People wanted front row seats to the implosion. Inside, it was standing room only. At the front, the board sat at a folding table. Charlene's seat, marked with a pretentious gold-embossed nameplate, was glaringly empty. Gregor tapped the microphone. Thanks for coming. We've received highly credible claims of gross misconduct, specifically the unauthorized draining of HOA funds and the attempted seizure of private property. Furthermore, we have been informed that law enforcement has officially escalated this from a civil dispute to a formal inquiry. He nodded toward the back of the room. A mountain of a man in a crisp suit walked down the center aisle. This wasn't Deputy Hines. This was Detective Alan Franks from the county's Financial Crimes Division. This guy didn't write parking tickets. He dismantled embezzlement rings. Franks stepped up to the podium and dropped a thick binder onto the wood with a heavy thud. I have reviewed the preliminary evidence. What we are looking at includes the misappropriation of community funds, the intentional falsification of official meeting minutes, and potential wire fraud. Let me be clear, these are not civil HOA issues. These are felony criminal charges. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Financial statements show over $15,000 spent from the discretionary account over the past 90 days with 0 recorded legal approvals. The bulk of it was wired to vendors for last Saturday's failed event. A gray-haired woman stood up, trembling with rage. You mean she used our monthly dues to throw herself in a legal, private vanity party? That is correct, Franks replied. Furthermore, we have subpoenaed the digital records. The vote logs were aggressively altered. Entries were backdated, and forged digital signatures were attached. It is a textbook case of corporate fraud. Gregor, looking pale but finally showing some spine, announced that Charlene was indefinitely suspended and the accounts were completely frozen. I stood up from the front row, holding up a small, silver flash drive. I am submitting formal evidence regarding the property seizure. This drive contains 4K gate camera footage, unedited audio recordings of her threatening me, and notarized statements confirming the lack of a vote. I am also submitting a petition signed by 62 residents demanding her permanent removal. Franks took the drive, sliding it into his government laptop. Thank you, Mr. Zeller. This goes straight into the prosecution file. As the meeting adjourned, people sat stunned in their folding chairs, processing the fact that their traditional values president was a white-collar criminal. But the rabbit hole went so much deeper. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Assistant District Attorney Reuben McGuire. He thanked me for the airtight evidence, confirming they were filing charges within 72 hours. But then, his tone shifted to something much more serious. Mr. Zeller, we are investigating a secondary issue. We found evidence that Charlene used HOA funds to pay a private contractor for heavy landscape improvements. The GPS tag on the contractor's invoice places the work about 50 yards from your western fence line. I ran a hand through my hair, my stomach sinking. That's the edge of the wildlife corridor. It's federally protected conservation land. Nobody is legally allowed to develop that. Exactly, the ADA said grimly. The Department of Environmental Regulation is furious. If she ordered unauthorized clear-cutting on protected land, she isn't just looking at local fraud. She's looking at severe state-level felonies. I walked to the edge of my property as the sun set. Sure enough, just beyond the tree line, I found fresh, heavy machinery tracks, illegally planted decorative shrubs, and a battered, uprooted sign that read, Conservation Area, No Development. Charlene hadn't just tried to steal my cabin. She had illegally bulldozed protected nature using stolen community funds, just to give her illegal party a better aesthetic view. I snapped geotag photos and sent them straight to the DA. The dominoes didn't just fall, they violently crashed. By the end of the week, special agents from the State Bureau of Investigations knocked on my door. The fraud wasn't just $15,000 of HOA money. Charlene had completely forged environmental impact reports, using a mismatched font that the state investigator called the sloppiest forgery of the decade. to secure $40,000 in state beautification grants. Where did the $40,000 go? The agents showed me a photograph. It went straight to a private contractor to build a massive, custom outdoor deck, imported stone fire pit, and surround sound system at a property located outside the HOA's jurisdiction. A property owned by Charlene's first cousin. She wasn't just a Karen. She was the mastermind of a coordinated embezzlement syndicate. The arrest was thoroughly public. The local paper ran a spectacular front-page photo of Charlene being shoved into the back of a police cruiser in the pouring rain, wearing oversized sunglasses and a bright red coat, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line of denial. The trial was a bloodbath of forensic accounting. I took the stand on day 4. I didn't embellish. I didn't show anger. I just laid out the facts, the video, the audio, and the property deeds. Her defense attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled neighbor, but the judge shut him down before he could even finish his sentences. The verdict? Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, misuse of public funds, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Charlene Griffin was sentenced to 9 years in state prison, with no chance of parole for at least 5. Her cousin got 3 years. The corrupt contractor was slapped with massive restitution fines and had his license permanently revoked. Our community underwent a massive purge. A new board was elected. Discretionary funds were legally dissolved. Every single dollar spent now requires public posting, dual signatures, and a 75% community approval vote. When you analyze a situation like this, the lesson is blindingly clear. Narcissistic megalomania operates on the assumption that rules only apply to the weak. They build their little empires by bullying people who don't understand the law, relying on social pressure and intimidation. But the moment their fragile illusion of authority collides with a meticulously prepared, legally literate individual who refuses to flinch, the entire house of cards collapses under its own weight. A month after she was locked away in a cell, I walked out to my mailbox. Inside was an envelope with no return address. It contained a single, beautiful photograph of my cabin taken from the trail at dusk. The warm light from the windows glowed peacefully against the dark pines. Untouched. Unconquered. Written on the back of the photo in black ink were 2 simple words, still standing. I locked my heavy steel gate, walked inside, and poured myself a drink. Here is the real question for you. If you woke up to find an entitled HOA president trying to hijack your house, would you have warned them immediately to save them the embarrassment, or would you let them walk straight into the trap just to watch the empire burn? Let me know.